And of course, it's black, like all cheap cars are. That's not my preference, but cheap is my preference. And so I was very excited to make them an offer. And so I proposed a trade difference with the R8, and, they said no. We're now in quarter two of 2023, and anybody who has watched the car market over the last 6 months or so will have noticed that it is generally softening. And that's particularly true for cars between, say, 100,000 and 300,000, which are mostly your higher volume production exotic cars. And those have been propped up very much by crypto money and bonuses being paid out, stock market returns, and things that we haven't necessarily seen doing so well over that period in time. Now, we do continue to see records set regularly for ultra high-end stuff. There's really strong numbers at auctions and things like that. But those cars that are kind of in that range are really, really hard to move. And I found myself during that period with a 2017 Audi R8 V10 Plus. Now, I had bought that car last year for the premise of Car Trek 9, which is sponsored by Auto Tempest and the Ticket Clinic, where alongside Freddie Tavares Hernandez and Tyler Hoover, we go on a car buying mission, in this case, to buy the coolest crashed exotic car that we could for the price of a new Z06. And with Tyler already having his 458 Spider and Freddie bringing his McLaren, I needed a non-McLaren, non-Ferrari, non-Gallardo, $100,000 to $150,000 exotic car, and the R8 made a lot of sense. The 2017, being the V10 Plus, was really the Huracan with a little more headroom and some better creature comforts, better infotainment. A really, really awesome car. Mine had been in really no accident at all. It just had a lot of miles on it, but that was the right car for the challenge. And so I bought that car and used it a lot last year. I took it on Gold Rush, representing Team Mod Find. We put on a Redenzo radar and laser system. We put in a police scanner. Arnie Toman and I drove it and had a blast. It was a really, really good car. So I put about 6,000, 7,000 miles on it, and I was kind of thinking that this might be a car that would allow me to sort of turn over a new leaf, something I'd had to leave behind a couple of years ago, and that is letting friends drive my cars. Now, I drive my cars as much as I can. I don't worry about miles. I don't worry about them getting hurt. I don't worry about anything. But I went through a period about 2 years ago for, 18 months where 100% of the time when I would let a friend or a relative or anybody drive one of my cars, it would break. And it was really awkward because I know that the cars are always going to break, and I kind of have to drive them knowing that. But a friend doesn't want to break my car. I don't want to put them in a position to break my car. It just got to be so much, and so it's going to be all right. Don't worry about it. Let's get it towed home, whatever the case may be, that I had to just put my foot down and say, I don't have the emotional capacity to deal with the dynamic that happens when they break. I can deal with them breaking all the time, but I usually need to be the one doing the braking because I can be mad at myself for that. And so I had to stop that, but the R8 seemed like something where that could happen. And I did let some friends drive it, people use it, and it was a great car, but I just got bored of it too fast. And so faced with the reality of marketing it on places like Auto Tempest and everywhere else, I just could not find a buyer. And I felt like it was priced aggressively. It was the cheapest clean title car out there, and nobody was buying the thing. Now, whenever that happens, the best bet is always to try to trade. Of course, that doesn't pull your cash out of it, but hopefully it gives you a car that you can enjoy driving a bit more. And so I start shopping and searching around, and I stumble across a few cars that seem interesting, but nothing's really working out. But over the last, 10 to 15 years, I think I've had 6 Ferraris, and some of them were for the rental car company. Some of them were like the $599 for Car Trek and the Scud that I owned for quite some time. I really do love the cars, and I sort of missed having one. And so I was focusing a lot on those, but I really wanted something that was a little bit more useful than the Mercedes or the Spiker, and I found a 2017 Ferrari GTC4 Lusso. Now, when I had an exotic car rental company back in college and in the few years to follow it, one of the Ferraris that we had was a 612 Scaglietti. And while I loved the 360s that we had that were sort of the primary rental cars alongside of it, the 612 was really special. It was super useful, it was super comfortable, it was very pretty in its own unique way, and I just really enjoyed the car. And I'd looked at times at buying an FF. I'd actually tried to buy an FF for Car Trek 4, justifying it with like a Premier Financial Services lease that would have been equal to the price of a new Camry, because that was the challenge. So whatever you'd lease a Camry for, with enough money down or trade equity or something, I felt like I could make that work. Regardless, I ended up with the Flood Title 599 and a different Ed logic to get to the purchase price. So I never got an FF, but I did get to sort of compare the R8 to the FF. You may recall that we did a video with Trevin from Sway trying to outfit the best car for Gold Rush. And he did a Ferrari FF with an amazing Sway livery and a roof rack and their robot dog and all their gadgets and off-road prep and stuff like that. And it was awesome. Of course, it broke all the time, but while I could sort of hail the supremacy of the R8 as a rally car, you don't get cooler than a 2+2 Ferrari. And so I was looking around at options and I found a fairly cheap Lusso. And it was at a Buick dealer north of Jackson, Mississippi. And according to Carfax, they'd had it for a year. And during that year, they had tried to sell it on Bring a Trailer. I learned that honestly from the VINwiki app. Someone had posted a screenshot of the listing. So then I go and look that up. And lo and behold, it does like 150 grand, which is well below the real money for even, like in this car's case, with a minor on its Carfax, a car that should be 225, 230. But it obviously was just sitting there. Nobody was buying this car, and it seemed like a really good trade opportunity. And so I contacted a salesperson at this, I think it was a Chevy, Buick, Jeep, I don't know, several franchise dealership in Jackson. He said, yeah, we would love to get it out of here. And it really didn't seem like there was anything wrong with it. It was a nicely optioned car with the upgraded wheels, sport exhaust, the passenger instrumentation, a lot of really fun stuff. And of course, it's black like all cheap cars are. That's not my preference, but cheap is my preference. And so I was very excited to make them an offer. And so I proposed a trade difference with the R8, and they said no. And then I kind of stayed on them, poking them every once in a while, saying, hey, would still like to have that car. And they still said no. But I guess after about a month or 6 weeks of back and forth, they finally just said, come and get it. And so it becomes time to road trip the R8 out there and then bring the Lusso back. And the car is exceptionally nice. It is certainly the nicest kind of usable exotic that I've ever had. The Spiker's the nicest car that I've ever owned, but I never owned a car as new as a 2017 before the R8, and I really like the Lusso a whole lot more. And for a negligible trade difference, this was the car to have. I like the idea of having the back seat. And so, I figure I'll probably title this video something to the effect of, I bought the best Ferrari ever made. And I honestly believe that it is. Now, it is not the fastest Ferrari ever made. It's not the best handling Ferrari ever made. It's not the coolest Ferrari ever made. But when you look at Ferrari's current offerings, it is the most useful car. It is the best sounding car. It is everything that you want out of a Ferrari. It just also has a back seat, and it's a little bit heavier, and it's kind of goofy from some angles. But I really love the thing, and all the miles that I've been able to put on it so far have been wonderful, save a couple. Because I got the car back and I knew that all Ferraris since 2012 come with 7 years of free maintenance. But that's as long as you get them maintained routinely. So if you have too much of a gap, you may not be eligible. And so since the car had been in inventory at that dealership for so long, I knew that it was kind of like time is of the essence for me to get it done. So within a couple of days, I drop it off with the guys at Ferrari of Atlanta. Now, they'd always taken care of my Scud. To be honest, a lot of people ask me about like independent maintenance on supercars. And for current generation stuff, I always say just go to the dealership because the guys at Ferrari of Atlanta have always treated me really well. I do use independents for the Mercies because the guys that are at Lamborghini Atlanta or any Lamborghini dealership in general are not trained that far back on the cars, so it might be the first or the third Mercy they've ever touched. But the guys at Ferrari of Atlanta are awesome, and so I drop it off. They do the oil change, brake fluid, whatever's kind of prescribed at it's got 29,000 miles. They get all that done, and he calls me. He says, Ed, are you going to keep this car? I said, I mean, at least for a little while. I like it so far. I might wrap it a different color or do something. He says, then you probably ought to put a warranty on it. Now, I usually buy cars very deliberately that are a little bit out of warranty because that's where the biggest value adjustment happens. And then over time, it all sort of evens out. And so I figured, well, I wouldn't normally, but if you're telling me that I need to get a warranty, I suppose that makes sense. I plan to drive it a lot over the course of the next year. And it was like $6,000 for the year, which is a ton of money. But the thing about modern exotic cars, especially cars like an FF or a V12 Lusso that have a front wheel drive apparatus that was pretty new for Ferrari, it made a lot of sense to be protected from that. So I figured this is probably going to pay for itself in the Doug DeMuro bumper to bumper sense of the word. Let's do it. So I get the warranty. And they have it, I guess, for a week or so. And then I go and pick it up, drive it a couple of days. And then I turn the car on and I get a front wheel drive oil pressure warning. Woo, okay, well, sleeping easier now because of that warranty, but it goes right away. The car drives fine, no sustained errors, anything like that. A couple of days later, it's another cold morning here in Georgia. I start it up and it flashes long enough for me to see it, not long enough for me to pull my phone out and take a picture. So I say, all right, well, probably this is going to happen. And then Chiro and Sam Hard and Scoot were here to film, and we were driving to dinner in the car in the rain, and every error goes off. Front wheel drive, steering, all traction control, ABS, wet mode activated, Manatino failure, the whole laundry list, not as a Christmas tree because it scrolls through each message individually, but the car again is driving fine. So they leave, we get home, not a big deal. But the next day I take it over to Ferrari of Atlanta, let them look at it. And so they immediately say, well, we see the PTU error. It has leaked some of the fluid out, not enough that you would have seen it accumulating, but it was a little bit low. So Ferrari said to top it off, do some testing. They end up driving the car like 150 miles, and they think that they're going to replace this part, which is like $36,000 or $37,000 for the power transfer unit, essentially this box that pulls the power off the front of the motor and feeds the front wheels. And I'm like, great. I mean, certainly that was the hope that things like that would be replaced. I mean, over the years, I've looked at FFs that had well over $100,000 in warranty repairs. So this seems like a pretty sound investment. And generally in this post double clutch era of Ferrari cars, you'll talk to the technicians, and usually if the cars come in, they're either there for tires or a transmission or a top. It's going to start with a T. So then I knew it was a good idea for me to be protected, and ultimately they weren't able to reproduce the symptom enough to get Ferrari to pay for a new one. So I have to expect that it's going to fail in a more proper fashion over the course of the coming months, because I am definitely going to spend some time driving the car. But as it is the latest generation of the 2+2 sort of grand touring, naturally aspirated V12 Ferrari, I think I'm in pretty good standing to say that it is the best Ferrari that they've ever made. At the very least, it's a whole lot better than the Audi R8 that I got rid of. Private party transactions are scary, but Caramel is the perfect tool to keep everyone safe. Once you've worked out your deal, Caramel comes in to work out all the paperwork, do the DMV paperwork no matter what state you're in, verify everybody's identity, and even manage the transfer of the money. So visit Drive Caramel now or the link in the description below, and they'll make your transaction run faster, safer, and more smoothly than any private party deal deserves to be. And for a limited time, Caramel is free to both buyers and sellers. With Caramel, I do the shrewd negotiation, they do the hard part.